Hello and welcome to an emergency episode of the Tired F1 pod coming to you straight after the British Grand Prix in Silverstone with me, Shez. So unfortunately, Amar can't be with us today, but I promise we will be back with a full debrief, the both of us, to talk everything about the Grand Prix. But there was just so much going on, both from a racing, sporting, emotional point of view, that I had to download my thoughts and I really just wanted to share them with you guys. So here we go. So I thought that was an incredible race. I was on the edge of my seat for most of it. Like there wasn't a moment really within that where I knew what was going to happen, where I could predict how things were going to play out. But ultimately it came down to three men. Two of them were absolutely elite. They were driving at the absolute top of their game. They showed what it is to be an F1 driver in 2024, to make the most of your equipment and get the best result from both yourself and your team. And there was one who knocked on the fringes of excellence, but was hindered a little bit, both by his own driving and his own team. But Lando Norris, we're going to come to you right at the end and talk about what could have been, maybe. But first, I want to start with Lewis. We've been waiting 2.5 years now for a race win from Lewis, and I have to say that one hit pretty hard. Emotions at the end were pretty strong. It was you could hear how elated he was in the car. He could struggling to get his words out. Bono doing his trademark get in there, it just hit different this weekend. And the long drought came to an end. I want to talk a little bit about how we got there, because I think a lot has been said over the past 2 years now about where Lewis is at, about the fact that Lewis is knocking on 40 years old, that he's lost a little bit. And I want to try and convince you that I don't think is really the truth. And I'm going to try and use a little bit of data to try and help with that. And I want to rewind back to Saturday and qualifying. So a lot has been made of the fact that Lewis is behind in the qualifying head-to-head. We've made quite a big deal out of it. I've said quite a lot that I think Lewis needs to improve in qualifying. But I've said also repeatedly that I don't think that that's because Lewis has necessarily lost anything. I think it's not an age thing. It's not a motivation thing. It's the fact that he's going up against a driver who, in George Russell, is perhaps one of the two quickest drivers over one lap on the grid right now. I would put him right up there with Charles Leclerc in that category. And I know today I don't have Amara to argue with me about that, but I promise again that we will definitely get into that a bit later in the week. But the evidence for George is pretty heavy, right? He spent a few years in Williams's, and perhaps his true caliber wasn't appreciated because he was up against a hobbled Robert Kubica and Nicholas Latifi, and you never really understood what his ultimate level was. But there were glimpses. The fact that he was getting a car that shouldn't really have got out of quali 3 regularly into quali 2 by the end of 2021, and the fact that he put a Williams, the slowest of slow things, on the front row of the grid at Spa, the fact that the one time he got his bum in a competitive car before he got his Mercedes call up, his proper Mercedes call up, at the Bahrain Grand Prix, the Sakir Grand Prix in 2020, he was less than a tenth of Valtteri Bottas. He is no slouch, and he's shown that over the past 3 seasons, going toe to toe with Lewis over one lap. But actually, they still have the smallest teammate gap on the grid at 0.159%. That's tiny. That's hardly anything across the entirety of a lap. And Lewis, I think, has always had a little bit of a a little bit of a deficit when it comes to qualifying. I've said that before, but there's evidence in his past seasons against really elite qualifiers that he just comes up ever so slightly short. It's minimal margins, but it's showing up again now. But where he's strong, he has remained strong. I just want to show you 2 points in the telemetry trace from the Saturday qualifying session. Both of these are from slow corners, and that I think is where Lewis really has his strength. So the first trace is from the Vale Woodcote loop complex right at the beginning of the lap. It's a slow left-hander and then a slow right-hander with a important exit onto the Wellington straight. And what you can see here is the delta, as always, my favorite trace. You can see that George is the reference line because he was quicker over the course of the whole lap, but here Lewis is quicker through this section, and you can see that he brakes later, he carries more speed through the village section into the loop section, and is only right at the end of the exit onto the Wellington straight that George is able to get back at him. And if you look at the second trace I've got, this is from the Vale chicane right at the end. Again, Lewis's delta is slightly quicker just before they come onto the pit straight. And again, he brakes later. He comes off the throttle later and he picks it all up again much quicker, coming straight out of Vale, the slow corner right at the end of the lap. So in slow corners, this is where Lewis has his strength. He brakes late, he rotates the car, and he uses it like a go-kart. You should be able to do that in a 1,000 brake horsepower, 900 kilo Formula One single seater monster, but he does. He treats it like he's driving around Rye House, and he's still 7 years old. But that is where the telemetry shows you that I don't think he's really changed. I don't think he's dropped off in his performance. Even in qualifying, I think he's just come up against someone who's really, really good. But in the race, he absolutely switched that around. When it got to the crux of the moment, when he was chasing George, he did the team thing at the beginning. He covered he covered George in the first corner, prevented Lando from getting past him. A robust defense into the slow corners at the beginning of the lap, and then kept tabs with George, saving his tires a little bit, and then saving them. He knew there was a bit of rain coming. When the rain came, then he pounced, and he was on the back of George like a rash. And that I think was where the difference was made. He got past him. There was no stopping the McLarens at that point, but then he benefited. He benefited by making the right call at the right time. Bono said, "What do you think of Inters? You want to go on Inters now?" No, it's still too dry. And at a time when his peers, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc, decided we'll take a gamble, we'll go into Inters, he didn't, kept on going alongside his peers at the front of the grid. But again, the key for him was to take advantage of the mistakes that McLaren made, leaving Lando out a lap too long. The pit stop that they made where Lando just pushed too hard, slipped up, went a bit too far in his pit box. That put Lewis in position. And when Lewis is out front, no matter what tyres he's on, he was able to manage them, bring them in nicely, and eventually, in that stunning finish, get to the end. And I don't think there were many drivers that can do that. What I thought was refreshing about him at the end was all of the things that we've talked about. Is he good enough? Does he still have it? Is he going to be able to win a race? We talk about them, we debate them, we come to our conclusions. But it turns out that Lewis is having exactly the same conversations with himself in his head throughout the last 3 seasons. I can't imagine how difficult that would have been. But you really got the sense that when he jumped out of the car, when he had that hug with his dad, which had me in tears. I just couldn't. When he had his post-race press conference, when he had the interview on the grid, there was a sense that he felt that he was back, and I think that bodes well for the rest of this season. You know, it bodes well for the mentality that he goes to Ferrari with. It's not I'm escaping Mercedes. It's I'm going there on the back of a successful season, of having got the best out of myself, of having proved to myself that I'm still the 7-time world champ. And in this humble YouTuber's opinion, one of the best two on the grid. But he wasn't alone. No, no, no. That race could have been good enough with just that one race performance. You know, Lewis holding off the McLarens, beating them in a ostensibly slightly slower car. That in itself could have been the story, but it wasn't, because there was another guy, and that guy was called Maximilian Verstappen. And he was the great white shark. Honestly, I think this race highlights the difference that I see in these two guys. Lewis, when the car is there for him and there's a chance for a win, the magic happens. He turns on the switch, and then you start to see what he can do. Max, every session, doesn't matter whether it's FP1 or Quali 3, he puts everything into it, absolutely everything into it. And if we rewind for him back to Saturday, I would say that arguably he had the most impressive performance on Saturday. Quali 1 was a mistake. Going off at Cops, causing floor damage, what was described as up to 100 points of downforce, which apparently could equate up to a second per lap of lap time. That's what he lost. And together, him and his team were able to get that back down from 100 points to 20 points of downforce loss only. That is incredible within one qualifying session, but it was Max that got the most out of that. With that level of damage, in Quali 3, he still put the car in 4th. Just think about that. Just think about the number of drivers we see that have any kind of damage, and then they're lost. They're nowhere. Their teammates just absolutely up the road. And where was Perez? Out in Q1. I mean, Max is just operating on a different plane right now. You know, he is so at one with his car, with his team, with himself, that even losing that much downforce, even making that mistake, doesn't stop him, and he came up 4th. And then the race, he said himself that he thought, you know, he could see everybody pulling off into the distance, and he feared that he would finish 5th or 6th. But then the great leveler, the rain, comes out. And where others made mistakes, most notably our friends in Papaya, Max did not. He came in early, along with Carlos Sainz, the other great reader of a race, and said, nah, Inters are what we need right now. That pushed him up a few spots, didn't it? Got him ahead of Oscar Piastri, got him on the tail of the McLarens. And he was there again, right at the end, when McLaren absolutely forgot that they had a brand new set of medium tyres. Max was there with a brand new set of hards. And again, that superior tyre management, bringing them in nicely, taking the hit at the beginning of the stint, to the point where Lando was falling off with burnt out, brand new softs. Max was getting past him. Max was past him and on for the win. And that was when this became a titanic battle. Shades of 2021. What was going to happen when these two guys came into close proximity? Well, we didn't find out in the end, but it was a close run thing. And I have to say, for me, we started off 2024 thinking it was going to be a repeat of 2023, a Max whitewash, winning every race by 25 seconds or more. But here we are, race 12, and we see Max Verstappen behind Lewis Hamilton on merit, based on the pace of their cars, but coming at him like the absolute beast, the champion that he is. And I was here for it. That was incredible. That's what I've been waiting for since 2021, the big rematch, because I knew Lewis hadn't really lost anything. The telemetry showed that. The deficit to his teammates showed that. And I knew that Max was hungry. He's now without doubt the best driver on the grid, right? That combination of Max, Red Bull, and the RB20 is unstoppable right now in terms of quality. Maybe not in terms of the out and out results because they've been caught by the other teams, but in terms of the quality of that relationship and the way that those three elements come together, there is nobody better on the grid right now, in my opinion. So there it was. That was what had me on the edge of my seat, unable to move at midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning. Unbelievable. What a privilege. We do have to talk about the third guy on the grid, Lando. I like Lando. I think this is his best season so far. But my issues are that both he and the team are learning on the fly how to fight in a championship battle, and both of them made mistakes. The team screwed over Oscar Piastri. They left him out a lap too long when they should have double stacked him when the rain came out. They left Lando out a lap too long. They put him on soft tires when they had a brand new set of mediums. They gave him the choice of dry tire. Why were they not making that decision themselves? But that somehow seems to absolve Lando of any criticism, but it shouldn't, because Lando made his own little mistakes too, overshooting his pit box. I know it was slippery. But it was the same for everyone. His teammate didn't slip up when he had to go into the pit box. So that, unfortunately, Lando, is on him. And then in that final stint where Lewis was able to hold on to the life of his tires, you could see he was going a bit slower at the beginning, that Lando was closing the gap. But once Lando fell back, he fell back precipitously. There's still a little bit of a gap there. It's not huge and it's not insurmountable. It's something that he'll learn. He'll get there and he'll be at some point in that elite club. But my worry for Lando is, how often does a driver or a team have a car that's capable of challenging for race wins, challenging for a title, whether it be constructors or drivers? It doesn't, and you're never guaranteed it. And what I don't want to see is race after race, them both Lando and the team squander the potential of that car through strategy and operational errors, and a little bit of naivety in the ultimate management of these fragile Pirellis, because you just don't know in 2025 if they're still going to have the opportunity to do it again. Maybe they will, but with everybody else moving, with everybody else improving, how do we know that that's what they're going to have? And if this is their best opportunity, they're wasting it. And I think that's a crying shame. Doesn't take away from this race though. I thought it was great. I'm really keen to hear what you guys think, and me and Amar will cut it up ourselves together. We'll have a chat about that a bit later in the week. But for now, I hope you enjoyed that. Please please subscribe, please leave us a little comment. We'll read all of them. We'll respond to as many as we possibly can, and we'll see you a bit later in the week.